I'd like to call the Monday, October 3rd, 2022 Finance, Audit, and Budget Committee to order. First item is Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, next item is adoption of agenda. I need a motion to adopt.
Support Van Sickle.
Made by Haas, supported by Van Sickle. Any discussion? Seeing none, please vote.
Motion passes 11-0.
Okay, next item is approval of minutes dated September 13th, 2022. Need a motion to approve.
Motion to approve Van Sickle.
Made by Van Sickle, supported by Zinner. Any corrections, additions, commissioners? Seeing none, please vote.
Motion passes 11-0.
Okay, next item is public participation. This is the first opportunity for public participation for those who wish to speak for a maximum of 3 minutes on an item which is on today's agenda. There also will be a second opportunity for public participation for those who would wish to speak on any issue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Dave J. I'm a former county commissioner, state rep and state senator. I live in Washington Township. And I'm here to talk today about the 183 Macomb County government politicians and bureaucrats that have a fake retirements and are taking $136 million in pensions and $13.4 million in salaries at the same time to do the same job. This is a fake retirement scheme. They don't really retire. There's no separation of employment, no retirement party, no gold watch. Politicians and bureaucrats simply sign a piece of paper and pretend to retire to take more money from the taxpayers. 5 years of pension payments are given to fake retirement triple dippers as a lump sum cash bonus. Some actually retire while others continue working, proving that triple dippers is just a money-making machine for government employees, Macomb County government employees. The highest cash bonus is $503,000. And 150 triple dippers take over $100,000 in cash pension bonuses. Some triple dippers are collecting overtime of 67% more than salary. So what are the triple dippers in summary? These public servants receive a salary and a pension, the second dip, at the same time to do the same job, and they don't pay 3% of their salary into the county retirement system like everyone else. And then you notice there's a cherry on the top. The cherry on the top is these triple dippers, when they retire, don't cash out their unused personal vacation and sick days at the day that they earned them, at the wage they earned them as they went up the career, but at their final highest salary, artificially taking more money from the taxpayers and artificially spiking up the last years in salary. This is a total benefit of $136 million, as I said, and on December 31st, there was a unfunded liability for drop of $136 million. Well, the Dow Jones Industrial has dropped over 20% since December 31st. So now it's over $200 million of unfunded pension liability, which is putting in jeopardy people that aren't on drop. There are criminal Macomb County politicians that are triple dippers, including ex-Macomb County prosecutor Eric Smith, with a salary over $152,000 and $82,800 a year pension, was on track to take approximately $746,000 in pension cash bonus. Eric Smith was charged, as you know, in state court with 10 felonies of stealing $600,000 in Macomb County taxpayer money. Ex-Macomb County Chief Assistant Prosecutor Ben Liston entered the Macomb County Government Drop Program in 2013, retired in 2018 with a salary of over $122,000, and took a pension cash bonus of approximately $612,000. Many Macomb County triple dippers are non-core mission employees, including warehouse services assistant, a cook, a janitor, 3 billing specialists, 2 carpenters, a security guard, janitors, teachers' aides, cashiers, 5 therapists, and incredibly, a part-time van driver.
You have 30 seconds.
Thank you. Ending triple dippers would create 183 new jobs without cutting a single government position. Hiring entry-level employees to replace triple dippers would save approximately 40% because of entry-level pay. About $5 million, plus approximately $402,000 that triple dippers don't pay of the 3% that they should be paying like everyone else in the Macomb County retirement system. TripleDippers.org will have the names, the job titles, the salaries, and the W-2 Box 1, final compensation of all the county employees. Thank you for your consideration to eliminate this county ordinance. 218-3 actually amend the county ordinance to add new triple dippers and require current triple dippers to pay 3% of their salary to the pension program like everyone else.
Would anyone else like to speak public participation? Any agenda item only? Going once, twice. We'll close public participation. Next item is department recommendations. 6A, this is a full board approval request at this committee today, waived by the Internal Services Committee Chair. Budget amendment for facilities and operations for jail renovations, proposals A, B, and C, and alternates 1 and 3 for a total of $5,140,881. I need a
Motion to approve Van Sickle.
Made by Van Sickle, supported by Haw. Lynn, you have the floor.
Good afternoon. I'd like to thank this board for allowing me to put this item on this agenda. And as you may recall, we were authorized to proceed with architectural and engineering services for 3 separate projects. This was the renovation to the locker room, an evidence lab, and also replacing a line that runs through these areas, the sanitary line that had deteriorated. Also is the barrier mesh, and this is for the protection of inmates and also corrections officers, and the door replacement project, in which we are replacing existing doors with cell doors with doors that have food chutes. These projects all involve the tower, and the whole purpose is also to extend the life of the tower. We elected to combine the 3 projects for bidding purposes in an effort to reduce the number of times that the sheriff's staff would have to relocate inmates. We know that it's very difficult for the sheriff's staff to move inmates, and we also wanted to eliminate any potential coordination issues when you have more than one contractor doing work. We also thought it was an opportunity, if we combined it, it would be a larger dollar value in the hopes of attracting additional bidders. So the purchasing department solicited bids on the Mitten site, and 230 vendors were notified of the solicitation. 50 vendors viewed the documents. Unfortunately, 1 sealed bid was received on September 20th, 2022. And we thought increasing that or making it more of an attractive project. We had 4 general contractors at the mandatory pre-bid meeting, so we thought that we would get additional bids. After the bid opening, we did talk to a company that came to the pre-bid meeting, and they said it's just the volume of work. And if the project is difficult and they have other work that's more attractive, they tend to want to bid the work that is more attractive. So we are requesting a budget amendment in the amount of $5,140,881, which includes alternate 1. And alternate 1 is the replacement of the lockers. There's actually 205 lockers. Their original equipment, there's a lot of wear and tear on these lockers. Many of the lockers are having difficulty in opening and closing. It seemed to be a waste of money if we decided to just paint them to have them aesthetically look better. Also, there is an alternate 3, and that is relative to the barrier mesh. Obviously, a key factor in the jail is visibility, so that the corrections officers can see the inmates. When you put up the barrier mesh, you lose some of that. So they actually had to add some cameras, and some of the existing cameras needed to be relocated. So we are recommending approval of both of those alternates. And we also would like consideration to approving this amendment and executing the contract at this time with Bernco. And the reason why we're in a rush is that there's long lead items, the barrier mesh is a long lead, the doors are a long lead, but we want them to be able to start doing the field measurements, to submit shop drawings, just to get a jump start so they can place this order. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. And just clarification on the motion, that was for 6A and 6B. Okay. Let's see here. Speakers. Oh, there's got to be a speaker here. Well, I have a question. Lynn, in regards to the timeline, I know you needed this approved today. Is there a deadline on this proposal? And second question, are you still having the same challenges with the amount of bids that you're receiving?
Yes, we're having challenges with the amount of bids receiving. We're going to sit down with purchasing and maybe see if there's other mechanisms to use in addition to the Minton site, and maybe other municipalities that are facing the same issue have some ideas. But we will be meeting with them. It just seems to be the sign of the times. Projects in the jail are always difficult because you don't have the ease of movement within the building, and there's going to be a lot of stop and starts to this project. So they'll get something to completed, then they'll have to wait, and it's based on, can the sheriff move enough inmates at the time? So it's a real undertaking to do work in multiple areas of the jail.
Okay. Seeing no speakers, please vote.
Commissioner, how your vote didn't come through for me? Your vote didn't come through for me, yeah.
There, how's that?
Perfect, thank you. Motion passes 11-0.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. Next item is presentations. 2023 Executive Recommended Budget. I need a motion to receive and file.
Support Kleinfeld.
Made by Wallace, supported by Kleinfeld. And Steve, I think you're going to start off the 2023 budget.
Welcome. First, that our budget hearings start in earnest tomorrow, where we take a much deeper dive in a department-by-department basis and start doing a more thorough analysis. But at its highest level, the budget is just over $1.1 billion. Second year in a row, we've exceeded $1 billion. It's about a 2.5 or 2.8% increase over the 2022 amended budget. I used to put a graph in this presentation. I just have it notated in text now. Notable funding sources for the budget are mental health and substance abuse services for just about $268 million. Roads, about $351 million. Large majority of that is indicated in the presentation, 77% is for road construction. And about half of that roughly is just for the Mound Road project. So when we get into the roads department meeting, you'll hear much more about that particular project. And then just general community action programs of about $68 million. Those include things like Meals on Wheels, congregate nutrition, Head Start, rental assistance, weatherization, home injury control. There's a number of those either at the Office of Senior Services or at Community Action. We've added a total of 57 positions, a little over that, And what's notable and of interest here is that 20 of those are at the Sheriff's Department and Corrections to alleviate overtime. So there's about $1.9 million reduction in overtime budget. So this is a cost neutral scenario here. In a few slides from now, there's a slide that shows all the positions by department and what the funding sources are. So of the remaining 37 positions, 27 of those are funded by the general fund for about $2.7 million, and the remaining 10 are in various grants for just under $1 million. Relative to the general fund budget, moving on to slide 3, the budget is just shy of $305 million, about a 7% increase over 2022, so we're slightly below the inflation rate. We've built in a 6.5% increase in property values. As you know, Proposition A allows for an inflationary impact of 5% or inflation, whichever is less. As we all know, inflation is above 5%, so we built in 5% for inflation. We've also built in 1.5% estimate for new construction and pop-ups or uncappings because of property sales. We've also built in about just shy of a 1% allowance for another Headley rollback. We've had 4 or 5 of those in a row. Expect that at least for one more year. I'm going to stay on the revenue side a little bit. We've built in just shy of $900,000 increase in revenue sharing. The state's indicated we're getting a 6% increase for 1 year, and then 5% going forward. Beyond that, we've built in about a $500,000 increase in liquor tax. That budget right now is about $6.5 million. We've built in 7. All indications are we will exceed that amount for this year, but we're budget conservatively on the revenue side, so we don't want to build too much in. Large increase in interest revenue, as you can imagine. The Federal Reserve continues to raise interest rates to curtail inflation. So there's a large increase in interest revenue. In addition, we now have received our second tranche of ARP funding, so we don't expect to spend the majority of that until beginning in 2024, so we'll earn interest on that. That's sort of been earmarked for capital projects, so we don't want to build permanent expenses based on temporary increases in interest revenue. We've reduced those anticipated revenues in 2024 and 2025 as we all hope that interest rates return back to normal levels, or I'll just keep it at normal levels. On the expense side, we've built in a minimum of 5% increase in wage expense. I don't want to say too much about that because we're in the middle of contract negotiations, but it's a minimum of 5 depending on pay grade. And again, we're in the middle of negotiations. And then, as you look at the capital plan, we've got $55 million of projects on the list for 2023. $40 million of that are sewer and water infrastructure programs at Public Works. As you've heard Vicki Wilbur indicate a few times now, we've allocated $40 million of our rescue plan money to Public Works. So again, out of the $55 million, $40 million is water and sewer. A couple other notable projects. We got a renovation going on at the Clemens Center to expand space to house the Public Defender's Office for about $1.7 million. The majority of that, $1.6, being funded by the state. And as you've heard from Kevin Evans, he has a number of capital needs over at Martha T. Berry, the most pressing being the upgrade of the HVAC system, not the HVAS system. I'll correct that. And we've allocated $1 million in the capital plan to assist Kevin in that endeavor. Slide 4 is a expenditure comparison between 22 and 23 by fund. And I think what I'd like to note on this slide is about maybe not quite a quarter of the way down, about a $51 million reduction in the budget at Community Action. Again, that's mostly attributable to the spend down of the rental assistance money that we received over the last couple of years, as well as the sort of the separation of the Senior Services Department into its own department. And then maybe 3/4 of the way down, roads, again, an increase of $70.3 million due to federal transportation funding and such, and, the Mount Road project. Community mental health, what I understand there, and Commissioner Kraft can speak more authoritatively, I'm sure, than I can, they're expecting about a 5% reduction in the number of eligible folks, as I understand, so the revenue and the expense has been decreased by close to 5%. So you'll hear much more about that from Dave Pankotay when he's here to talk about mental health. And then the last item on the list there is the debt service fund. Those requirements are going down by $2 million in '23 because the last of the Martha T. Berry and Youth Home renovation bonds from about 20 years ago were paid down this year. And I'll have there's another slide later on in the presentation that talks about our debt load. It's very light. We have, other than the retiree healthcare bonds, we have one construction issue remaining, and that matures in 2030. And I'll talk a little bit later about a proposal that I plan on bringing to the board to set aside some of our general fund balance to call bonds early in 2 or 3 years. Moving on to slide number 5, this is a schedule of revenues and expenses for all funds, again, the $1.1 million. And this is by revenue and expense category. And again, there's various revenue increases and decreases depending on which funds make up the majority of those line items, and we'll get more into that again as we go through department by department. If you have specific questions about those line items in advance of department meetings, I would suggest that if I can't answer them today, that you follow up with Kyle and I can get more of a breakdown of what's going on there line by line. The next 2 slides are graphical representations of revenues and expenses, same chart or same information as I just talked about, but except in graphical form. I put this in every year. You can see on slide 6, state and federal revenue sources are about 42% of the total budget. And property taxes are only 14% when you combine all funds. But in the general fund, it's closer to 50%. On the expense side, on slide 7, you'll see again, road construction is about 1/4 of the budget. Contract services is about 1/4 of the budget. Contract services is primarily composed of services provided in substance abuse, roads, and mental health. Slide 8 is the schedule of new positions. And you'll see again, the net increase is 54.4, but there's a reduction in the Macomb St. Clair Employment and Training Agency. That's Chris Riley's group. They've had a reduction in some of their federal funding, so he has to reduce 3 positions. If you take that out of the equation, we're back to the 57.4 I talked about earlier. And you'll see that in the Sheriff's Department, 20 of those are associated with a reduction in overtime of $1.9 million. I'll move on to slide 9, and we're moving on to the general fund now. This is again revenues and expenses in by category. And you'll see we've got that 5.6% increase in property values. It's about $8 million. Intergovernmental is composed of revenue sharing, liquor tax, personal property tax reimbursement, court financing, judge's salary reimbursement, a number of things like that. So we've got about a 4% increase in that line item. Charges for services and reimbursements, a large majority of that line item are contracts with local units for patrol services and dispatch services. At the Sheriff's Department, indirect cost allocations, we all know, is overhead chargebacks from the departments or to the departments from the central service departments. You'll see again, a large increase in interest rates. I can tell you, I looked today and we're investing, a 1-year treasury today yields 3.9. A year ago it was yielding 0.15. A 1-month treasury is yielding 2.7. A year ago it was at 0.06 as of today. So again, we've got, the rescue plan money plus our fund balance in the bank, so that's driving the increase in interest revenue for 2023. We talked a little bit about wages. There's, other than the across-the-board increases that we're currently negotiating, you have about 2% built in for the new positions, 2% built in that we provided to all the employees in May of this year that you're aware of. You've got people working their way through step grades and a few other things. You got health increases in healthcare chargebacks and things of that. It's all making up that increase in personnel. You'll see a relatively large increase in repairs and maintenance percentage-wise. That's primarily due to the increased costs of maintenance agreement on our IT equipment. Those are going up quite substantially. Jacob will be here tomorrow to talk about that. He can provide much more insight to what's going on in that arena. What I would like to point out is that at the end of 2022, if we had nothing but our budgetary targets, we're on target to have fund balance of almost $100 million at the end of 2022. I expect we'll probably exceed our budgetary targets in a positive manner. I don't know to what degree. We typically do, so it's likely that we could have over $100 million in fund balance at the end of 2022. Again, I'll talk a little bit about one plan to take some of that fund balance and use it to reduce our future debt service payments and save about $1.5 million in interest costs. Slide 10 is a graphical representation of our fund balance as a percentage of expenses. Industry practice would tell you that you should have between 15 and 20%. More than 20% is good in my opinion. You can see we popped up to a little over 40% in 2021. We're drawing down a little bit on that, and it's kind of leveling off in about 35%, which is still very healthy. We should be proud of the fund balance that we have. The next two slides are graphical representations of revenues and expenses in the general fund. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on those. I will spend some time on number 13, slide number 13, which is a line graph of the change in taxable values and SEVs, or state equalized values, over the last 10 years. And you'll see that there's a gap there, which is a good thing. And I think I've talked about this before, and I'm sure you're aware that that gap then gives us some downside protection in the economy. So there's a 32% differential there. So SEV can decline, but your taxable value could still go up. And we saw that back in the Great Recession, where there was some delay in our taxable values coming down and meeting SEV. So there's a good and a bad to Prop A. So this is the good, I guess. The bad is on the recovery side, it takes slower to recover coming out of a recession. So I'll leave that at that. Just wanting to point out there's some protection there for us in the winds of oncoming recession, as it seems. Slide number 14 is a representation of our outstanding debt. So we have two issues related to our retiree health care program, which is very healthily funded compared to most around the state. And our central campus bonds, as you can see, expire in 2030. What I do intend on coming to you with at Finance Committee, I think in 2 weeks, or 2 weeks from tomorrow, is a proposal to transfer a little over $17 million of fund balance from the general fund to our debt service fund for the specific purpose of calling or redeeming the last 5 years of maturities in 2025. So that's about 17.2 million. If we call those bonds in 2025, then that saves the county $1.5 million, or just shy of $1.5 million in interest costs over those 5 years. Those bonds currently in those years yield anywhere from 3.2 to 3.5%. So I've had conversations with Commissioner Sabatini about, well, it's not advantageous to borrow today because of the interest rate environment. So if the money's there and for some reason we need to issue bonds down the road, we can always evaluate interest rates then with interest rates on those bonds and maybe not call them and use that cash to pay cash for projects versus issuing bonds. If that plan were to be approved and followed through in 2025, that would relieve the general fund of about $3.7 million in debt service payments beginning in 2026. Slide number 15 is principal and interest payments combined through 2035. So just an addition of interest expense to the schedule. Slide 16 is just another graphical representation of the previous slide, breaking down interest and principal payments. And the last two slides are just information about our pension system and our retiree healthcare plans. So at the end of 2021, very happy to report that the pension plan was 105% funded. Expect that to go down somewhat this year in the face of what's happening in the stock market so far this year. But very happy to report 105% funding level at the end of 2021. Slide number 18 is same information, funding information relative to the county's retiree healthcare plan. So the roads has their own plan with MERS. So this plan covers Martha T. Berry sheriff and general employees. At the end of 2019, which is the last year we have a completed valuation for, 62%. So we've been making steady progress at that as well. You can see in 2000, it was at 14%. So again, in 2015, we closed the plan to new hires, and that reduced the overall liability. We've had very good returns, as Commissioner Haw knows and Commissioner Brown, the last 2 or 3 years in the stock market, which has increased the funding. Again, I've mentioned to you in the past, these numbers for the retiree healthcare plan do not include the money we have in the retiree intermediate healthcare fund, which are the bond proceeds. If you include those, we're over, I think, over 100%. But for accounting reasons and actuarial reasons, we cannot include those as part of the healthcare plan. And slide number 19 is funding information relative to the roads retiree healthcare plan. They've been overfunding that plan for a few years now. And you'll see at the end of 2020, now that I'm on the right slide, 127% funding. So we should be very proud of the funding levels of our legacy systems. I'll refer to them as that. We should be very proud. I'll just leave it at that. That concludes my comments. So if you have any questions, I'll try to answer them if I can.
Thank you to the staff for getting this printed ASAP. The print department was not available to do this for us, so we had to outsource it, and they got it done in a pretty quick turnaround. But we have obviously the schedule of the process here going forward, all the committees and what departments will be at those specific meetings right here in the front of your packet. And obviously Steve has gone through pretty much sections A and B of the budget. I mean,
A little bit of C.
Little C.
Yeah, I didn't get too much into the special revenue funds.
So obviously, as we get into each one of these departments, now that you're all veterans with the budget process from last year, Commissioner Kleinfeld's smiling. What we'll get this, it'll be the same process as we did last year. Kyle will be the gatekeeper, and obviously, any amendments, anything that you're looking to make changes to the budget, please direct those to Kyle. Certainly, if you have any questions for any department heads, any follow-up questions, Kyle will work through those as well with them and with Steve. And I thought last year was a very smooth process. This year, obviously, another big budget, $1.1 billion with a B. So we're going to keep the same process and structure, and hopefully it's as smooth as it was last year. So first on the list is Vice Chair Kleinfeld.
So Steve, the increase in property taxes for 5.6, is the 0.6 the new construction? Because
No, it's 5 for inflation, 1.5 for uncappings and new construction, less about 0.9% for a rollback allowance.
So we don't over countywide, we don't have to roll back based on new construction either?
No.
We only have to roll back the
on
other?
existing properties, yes. So we've had about between 0.9 and a 1% rollback for 6 years probably now.
Right, so I was thinking, the reason I asked if the 0.6 was new construction is because the combination of Proposal A and Headley is 5% or the rate of inflation. The rate of inflation has been higher, but so 5% would be the cap. So the 0.6 would have to be new construction, wouldn't it?
I guess you could look at it that way. I mean, the net is 5.6. I mean, we could have more for new construction. Hopefully that's the case.
Okay, because otherwise then are we not rolling back enough? Right? Okay.
We may, it's all an estimate at this point.
Okay.
And so, we could not be rolling back enough. We won't know that until next spring. That's the issue. Is we're
Okay.
estimating today what's gonna happen once all the property values and all equalization does all their work in Kristen Seeloff's office, and that won't happen. We
Well,
won't
that's
know
why
that
I'm
till
thinking
April.
the 0.6 has to be considered new construction, because otherwise we're capped at 5.
Right. So I mean, we're hopefully over 0.6. That would be the hope.
Okay.
That's not a lot. We've been over 0.6 in new construction for a few years now.
And we'll get into it deeper when we get to Martha T, but boy, we got a real healthy fund equity, and there's not a whole lot of an ask there. I don't know if we could work something out to keep those folks afloat.
Okay.
We'll have that
Duly noted.
discussion as we go into the future. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Commissioner Haw.
Thank you, Chair. I do agree with you, the process went very well last year, but just for our own edification, maybe you could explain it again, since this is the recommended budget from the county executive, what transpires forward? That's just one of my few questions.
Sure. So basically, the process is as follows. We'll be meeting with the department heads, will be coming before the board at their designated times. We've already confirmed with all the departments, so they will be here on those dates. Kyle will be the gatekeeper as far as any amendments. So if a commissioner does want to make an amendment to a budget specifically, it needs to be in writing, needs to be sent to Kyle. He'll then collectively put all that information together, then transmit it all to the commissioners to see exactly what those amendments are. Obviously, we need to work with Steve and get with those final numbers to see what that budget will be, whether it's an up and down. So it's kind of like a rolling balance. And from there, I don't know the date, but we will have budget meeting. I think we have about a week there prior to adopting that amendments can be made. We'll talk through each one of those individually as we have in the past and vote on them. And as that rolling total goes through, we'll have basically a approved budget at that point. Cal, did I miss anything in that process?
No, I think you're pretty good. I think, and Commissioner Hall, you make a good point. It's the recommended budget, so you guys are just receiving and filing it today. You're not voting on approving this budget. Just receive and file, and we're moving on from there.
Thank you. And as noted by Steve, this budget, without us adding anything to it, is a 2.8% increase over last year's budget?
In total, across all funds,
In
correct?
total across all funds, okay. What is the percentage of bonded indebtedness that we have now? Do you know?
Not off the top of my head.
Okay, we'll add
percent-
that to the question.
Okay.
How's that?
Yeah, very low.
Thank you. And somewhere I read, and I thought it was in a newspaper article, that the county receives revenue from the state at 55 or 59,000 per cannabis
Dispensary. Yes,
dispensary.
we built
It's
400,000.
not grow, it's a
Yeah.
dispensary, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
we received just shy of 339 or 340,000 this year, which was the first year we received a distribution. We built in 400,000 for 2023.
Yeah, because at a quick glance, I was trying to find that in here, and,
It's part of the intergovernmental line item.
oh,
So that's
goody.
revenue sharing, liquor tax, personal property tax reimbursement, court financing, the marijuana
Okay.
distribution. There's a lot of things in that line item.
Okay, good to
But
know.
400,000 of it is reimbursement for the tax on the marijuana
From the
sales.
state.
From the state.
Okay. And I just want to point out to the board members, he mentioned that our retirement fund is 105. I think now it's 104 is what Steve said funded. That puts us in the 1 percentile in the entire country. So retirement funds have been watched very, very closely for many, many years to get where we're at today. We should all be wearing a star with that printed on it.
We should be very proud of where we're
There's
at.
very few
Very proud.
retirement funds that can make a statement like that. So, thank you. That's all I have, Chair.
Commissioner Kraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hi, Steve.
Hey,
The settlement, the opioid settlement dollars, where are those in the budget?
they aren't out at this point. We don't know when we're going to get them. We do not know. So it's about 1.8 million. We'll come to the board with a budget amendment once we know what we are getting.
Are we expected to get that before year's end?
I don't know.
Don't know? Okay.
I don't know. There was word a week or two ago, I heard that some locals or some recipients had received a distribution. We have not.
How are we planning to track that in the budget going forward? We know we're going to get the funds. It's just a matter of when. So year after year, what's your plan to put it in the budget book? Or where do you plan to put that, I guess?
It's going to be in a
That's
special
what I would
revenue.
like to-
Yeah,
yeah.
It's a special revenue fund. Now, whether it ends up in community corrections or in mental health, I'm not exactly sure at this point.
Okay.
It'll be in a special revenue fund of some sort.
We'll be
It
able
will
to.
not be in the general fund.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Zinner.
Thank you, Chair. Hi, Steve. You touched on a couple areas where I have brief questions about. You mentioned, when you mentioned about the jail having 57 more new positions or filled positions, you mentioned about the deputies. You briefly said something about the deputies.
Corrections deputies.
Oh, just.
I believe I
the
mentioned
correction-
corrections.
Oh, so
but
that's all about
The
corrections.
position, it's all about corrections, and the title is corrections deputies.
All right,
So
okay.
a few years ago, they used to be titled corrections officers. They're now corrections deputies, and they've been that title for a few years now.
All
But it's
right.
all corrections.
All right. So I guess we'll wait and find out about when the sheriff's budget comes then? Mm-hmm. All right.
You'll be able to talk about order overs and overtime issues at the jail and that
I'm
sort of
just,
thing.
I'm just wondering about how many positions, where we're at with positions. Yes, and I want to make sure for Martha T. also, I know the HVAC is mentioned. You said 1 million, but it's printed 1.8 million, 1.8
The
million.
project cost is estimated at 1.8 by Mr. Evans. We've been in discussions for some time with Kevin about providing about $1 million from the general fund.
And the other two projects that he has, I think are of concern, and I guess we'll see if we can whittle something else out. I guess that's what we're here for. All right. Roads, is there any expectation about what what Lansing sends us?
I'll defer to Brian when he comes
Okay.
for his budget. Brian and Michelle Mikatak.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Commissioner Farrington.
Thank you, Chair. Steve, thanks for coming in. Couple comments, then just a question. Fund balance, I love how healthy it is. I see a lot of dark clouds coming, not just the next couple of years, but potentially long-term. So I'm happy to see that fund balance. For the board's sake, just on C7, C9, quick calculations, corporate counsel is up 16.6%, IT 16.4%, county executive 25% increase, finance department 30% increase, MSU extension 22.3%. So we don't need to answer those right now. I just want to bring that to people's attentions when we get there. My question to you is hiring. How has that gone this year? Because, I mean, we heard so much about how far behind we were on openings versus filling them. Where does that stand now as far as us filling all the positions that were approved and, so forth? So how are we doing
I don't know
these
how
days?
many vacancies we have today versus 2 or 3 months ago when I provided a vacancy report to you. What I'm told is we're receiving more and more applicants, which is a good thing. So we should be hopefully filling some of those positions. I think we have 1 position left in my office, but we had difficulty earlier this year finding qualified candidates. But I think we're finding, from what I'm told, more applicants in the pool.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Commissioner Matuzak.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Same sort of question that Jeff asked. I met with the sheriff a few weeks ago who was describing how much difficulty he's having finding folks to work in the jail. Now we're going to increase his positions by a lot in this budget. I'm wondering if that's real.
Well, if he can't hire the positions, we'll continue to work the overtime, essentially. So it's a net wash. Deputies are filling deputy positions, I believe, and understand are a little bit of a challenge at this point as well. I think more than the corrections, from what I've had conversations with the sheriff about.
Yeah, I mean, he indicated to me he's having trouble filling both positions, and they've
Yeah.
been working hard at the jail positions, and I offered him some suggestions. The fund balance. I appreciate a healthy fund balance. Some might look at our fund balance and say that's pretty excessive in terms of a fund balance. We collect taxpayers' money to spend for the benefit of the taxpayers, and letting it sit in the bank
I
seems to be...
I would say this to you. If you look at that in conjunction with the capital plan, there are some drawdowns in fund balance over the coming years.
I agree, and as I
And
said,
so we have many capital needs that are much needed. And so if you look at that capital plan, there's a significant drawdown on fund balance over the next 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, how we account for the capital plan is always a bit amorphous to me. It's out there, maybe real, maybe not real. We'll see what we get. That
Well, we
makes me
don't-
crazy.
Yeah.
It just does. It's like I would like an actual plan and how we're spending the money. I'm just concerned about that. As a couple of my colleagues have talked about, Martha Teaberry, we set up what to me looks like a private company that we don't let really be private because we're still charging them. And if we shut them down, it would cost us more. I would like us to see about using some of this fund to stabilize them, and actually let's make them a private company. Let's really spin them off. Let's figure out how to keep them from living in this sort of limbo that they live in, which I think is not fair to us, the residents, or the staff there. So those are my comments.
I would offer this in response, Commissioner. Remember that we allocated about $8 million of our CARES money to Martha Berry to help keep them afloat, if you will. And the I mentioned earlier that the debt service payments on that building were paid off in 2022, so we were charging them about $1 million a year in building use, and that agreement expires in conjunction with the expiration of those bonds. So there's about another $1 million of cash that comes back into their budget starting in 2023.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Steve, in regards to the personnel, I know on the general fund side, we've got 47.4 that's allocated here. What was the number last year that was recommended?
In the general fund, I cannot remember, Commissioner. I think we were at 70, high 70s overall. I can compile those numbers for you if you'd like me to.
So it's...
I just have to go back to this document from last year.
Right. Usually know those numbers right off the top of your head, Steve, so that's why I figured I'd throw that out there.
I try to remember them all, but sometimes I can't.
In regards to, obviously, the overtime reduction in the sheriff budget, moving it over to, another employee, I think is a good thing for sure. Is that just, and obviously I can ask this to the sheriff as well, but I know over the years, this is always one of my concerns because they have one of the largest overtime budgets in the county. And I always asked, why can't we just get rid of that and just hire more people? And obviously it looks like that's what they're planning on doing here.
That's what this is attempting to do.
Specifically to do that. So I'm glad to see that. Glad to see that we do have the $100 million in the general fund. I remember when I initially got elected as a commissioner, I think it was like 30 million or something. It wasn't very high back in the day. But long story short, I'm glad that we're at 100 million now, and it's our rainy day fund. If it's needed for whatever the purposes are, we have that money that is available, and I'm glad that we do have a surplus here in this budget of $326,000. The other thing too, in regards to the pension, as Commissioner Hall was saying earlier, that we are over 100% in both the pension and the retiree when you do the calculation in there. I know with the market changing, but the downward trend, there's concerns here of a recession and all those types of things. But in regards to the pensions themselves, I think commissioners really need to understand and know Commissioner Hall has always given us updates on the pension side. I sit with him on the retiree side. But, this is huge for us to not have to have this, barrier for us to figure out. We've made the right decisions in the past, and finally we're able to see 100% plus funded, both pension and retirees. So I'm just glad to see it now in paper, in writing, and you can actually say that, Steve, because I know back in the day it was not at that level, and you saw that on the chart earlier today. So that's just great planning. That's great people. That's people working together, and we've got to this point. So that's just huge. We are at second round. Commissioner Hall.
Thank you, Chair. Steve, and I can't follow enough on what Commissioner Chair Sabatini has said with the pensions. To be in that position is just an incredible feat by the county, and part of the discussion on the sheriffs. Remembering it's proposed or we're approving a new intake center over there, and the corrections officers are the ones that work in the jail in the intake center. So what the sheriff is saying is, okay, we're putting this new facility up. Not only am I short-handed, I'm going to need corrections officers to work in that intake center once it's concluded. So whether or not it was cost neutral, they have 1.9 in overtime, it's going to take some time to not only hire those corrections officers, but the need with the intake center being constructed, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
And it'll take a few years for that intake center to,
And also,
be put up
bless you.
and go live, of course.
And also, we talked about the ability to hire those individuals. That discussion has taken place with, was with Andy McKinnon. When you take the retirement program away and you reduce health care benefits, and I've suggested to all my commissioner colleagues, go look in those requisitions on our coffee room wall in there, where many of them have a starting salary of 21,000 and a high end of 41. And I'm not discrediting McDonald's, but if you're married and have a family, living on 21,000 isn't going to get you very far, if anywhere. So I believe Andrew and his team was looking at some, I don't want to say enhanced, some reinstatement of benefits to try and increase our hiring population. And it's kind of a pandemic, if you look across the state, with positions that are open. When the salaries and the benefits aren't there. I'm sorry, folks, that's how we lose people, because they are being offered elsewhere. I can guarantee you local municipalities are hiring our sheriffs away because they're offering defined contribution programs, they're enhancing health care benefits, and the starting salary, I believe, in some communities is about $9,000 more annually. So it's,
Right, I
it's
would
difficult enough being a police officer in the first place with all of those detriments. I believe at one time he said he was 83 positions short. That's not something that helps us deter crime. So all of those are a bunch of factors that I'm going to be looking at in this budget process. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Van Sickle.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know if I have so much a question as a couple of statements I'd like to make, just for sharing my thoughts with my fellow commissioners. Overtime generally pays about 50% extra, right?
Correct.
And if you hire a person, your benefits are about 50%. So if you eliminate all the overtime by hiring new people, I don't know that you really cut your budget that much. But if the new people are lower paid than the people who are with their 50% benefits working straight time versus more senior people who are at a higher rate of pay, you do save a little bit. But I don't know that it's the panacea that I sort of got you were implying it was. The other thing is that one of the bad things about working people on overtime for extended lengths of time is that they tend to, their spending habits tend to grow into their income. And if we cut all the deputies' overtime, I'm not saying we should or shouldn't, this is just points to think about. If we cut their overtime, we're essentially cutting their pay. And we may encourage some of our deputies to look elsewhere for jobs that pay more. As Commissioner Haas pointed out, some places are paying more because they've had their pay cut by removing all the overtime. So I'm betwixt and between about, replacing all the overtime. Because like I say, you're taking a senior person getting paid 50% more with a junior person that didn't exist before, who's getting paid 50% in benefits on top of his hourly. Just things to think about. Thank you.
And I would say this to you, Commissioner, is an idea that when you start working folks too much overtime, then you have liability issues there as well. So there's some offset there as well.
There's no clear-cut answers, no clear-cut situations. I
Yeah, so you don't
totally
wanna-
agree.
So people may, if you're working them too much overtime, they may leave anyway. That's just my perspective.
Absolutely, you don't want people working 80, 90 hours a week. You don't
Correct.
want things being crazy.
Right.
But on the other hand, I don't know how much overtime the sheriff's department is generally having their people work. Do you have any kind of,
I know
What-
total hours, I don't know, I don't have any schedule of number of hours at my quick disposal by employee. The sheriff will be able to tell you a bunch more about, order overs and what's actually going on in the sheriff's department relative to overtime. There's a lot of it.
hopefully he has a cap on how many hours any individual can work in a week?
I would hope so. I don't know that. I don't know what their policy is.
I'll ask him that question.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Commissioner Kleinfeld.
Thank you, Chair. Was the first I heard that there's any discussion about possibly like bringing back pension, defined contribution, defined benefit. Did I not press it? I'm sorry. My inclination would be offer a higher salary because you have more control over that, right? Where everybody got in trouble was people living longer, the health care for retirees shooting up, skyrocketing, unanticipated costs associated with that. So actuaries just weren't right 30 years ago, quite frankly, because nobody thought everybody was going to live to 100 at that time.
Right.
So we don't know where the future is going with that, and that always scares me. But we'll have those discussions during those meetings. My question is with regard to the actual schedule. So this is for Joe. So it looks like you have a RPS 1 on the 20th and a 2 on the 24th. Did we only have one last year? Was it last year? Do you remember when we had the clerk, we had the prosecutor?
I think all the law enforcement or public safety departments
We
were in
we were
courts
here
and-
for hours. Is this a breakdown from that, or was that broken into two before? It's never a good idea for us,
Kyle.
I think, to have the clerk, the sheriff, and the prosecutor here at the same time.
And Kyle or Crystal knows, Kyle knows that answer.
I'm trying to find it right now, but we did consider that when creating the schedule, and it is broken into two, but there are certain departments like the prosecutor and the courts and the clerks, because they all work together, so we like to see them all be done together. But we did work that into the schedule, and once I find it here, I'll be able to give you a better answer.
Okay, because the problem with that is when we start hitting 3.5, 4 hours, number one, we tend to lose commissioners. Number two, people start to lose focus on their questions, and so the later departments don't get the attention that the earlier ones do. Some of those departments take a considerable amount of time. So if that's pliable, if you could take a look at that. I don't know that they all need to be at the same time. Those are three countywides, all coming in on the same day. And we have all these little departments that come in and we have 10-minute meetings. And that makes no sense to me, that we have to categorize our finance, audit, and budget meetings by our other committees, which is what it looks like we've done, is going to create a 4-hour meeting and a bunch of 10-minute meetings. I just think we've got to find a way to level that out. And this is, the meeting set might not be pliable, but there might be some pliability in who comes in when. I wouldn't have focused on doing it by our committees, because that committee has most of the county. Anyway, it's just something to think about. Okay.
The back of the cover sheet, it gives the department breakout by
Okay.
date. And Crystal did point out to me the sheriff was split out of that, and that's that second one is community corrections, emergency management, sheriff, and then the E911 dispatch.
Okay, so it'll be the clerk and the prosecutor.
Correct, along with the child care fund, the public defender, and the courts. Which,
Okay,
yeah,
that's all right. I was just looking at this. That's fine.
Prosecutor, clerk. Sure.
That's still a lot. That's still a lot in one day. And we're going to have, if you think about it, we're going to have departments coming forth where most of the things are grants and we don't have a lot of play in them anyway. To have a meeting that has that many concerns me. But anyway, I'm just pointing it out. I'm not in a position to say anything. Thank you. I don't chair it anymore.
Okay.
You don't want the pizza?
Commission,
I'm saying that now so I can have an I told you so later.
Commissioner Zinner.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to say what Commissioner Hall said, but I didn't think I was supposed to say it at this meeting. Yes, I've talked to several police agency leaders. One was an officer, a seasoned officer, and I don't know if it should go back to a pension or not, but the fact that we do not have, we're losing so many of our county deputies is of great concern, and it's a great concern to the citizens and our employees for the county. They're not getting paid what they need to get paid to pay their bills because of inflation and other factors. And we've been talking about this for several months. I don't know why this problem isn't solved. I don't know why they haven't made a decision. And I agree with Commissioner Matusik. I know that the executives are very, they've received a lot of awards for further thinking and coming up with great ideas and all that. But I mean, if we don't have enough people to do the job right, and especially essential people, then our citizens could be at risk. And that's just something that I'm not prepared to vote for, is our citizens being at risk. I want them taken care of. That's what's essential, is our people. And our people shouldn't have, our workers shouldn't have to go somewhere else because they can't afford a package of diapers. This stuff is it's just not logical to me. It is logical to do what's best for our citizens, is the way I'm thinking it. And when you said something about the last statement about giving money, you gave money to Martha T. not too long ago, or however that worked. Seems to me that Martha T. didn't work out well with that money. It didn't work out as well as it was expected to. So I think, I hope it all works out much better this time. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner. Okay, seeing no other speakers, please vote. Thank you, Steve. We will see you tomorrow.
And the next day, and the next day, next week.
Motion passes 12-0.
We're good on the vote?
12-0.
Next item is public participation. This is the this is the second opportunity for public participation for those who wish to speak for 3 minutes on any item. Seeing no one in the crowd. Going once, twice. We'll close public participation. Move to commissioner comments. Commissioner Matuzak.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Older Adult Advisory Committee met last week, and to continue on with the discussions about emergency notifications, they spent some time brainstorming some ideas that they thought would be helpful in terms of beefing up our ability to notify seniors in particular in cases of emergency. So we are putting that together in sort of a loose document. If any of you have talked to any of your community folks and they have some ideas about things to do, if you could get those to Adriana. She's sort of putting together a list, and then I would like to forward that list. I'll share it with everyone here, but also forward it to the executive's office and the emergency management team they came up with some good ideas about ways to notify seniors that would be more effective, or ways in which we could promote people signing up for notifications, which is where the problem seems to be in terms of getting emergency information out. So I'm happy to share that. The committee was very happy to be asked to do that, and they offered some good ideas. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. If we could, I'd like to just take a moment of silence. If you may or may not have heard, our longest-serving Chief Judge, Peter Masseroni, passed away last week. He was actually laid to rest today. He served on the bench for 24 years and nearly 13 as our Chief Judge here in Macomb County. So if we can just have a moment of silence for him. Thank you, Commissioners. Seeing no one else on the list, we will now move on to adjournment.
Support.
Moved by Kraft, supported by Ha. Please vote. Thanks, everybody. See y'all tomorrow.
Thank you. Motion passes 12 to 0.